Hi, I'm the History Guy. I love history, and if you love history too, this is the channel for you. A little-known 19th century British expedition to the wilderness of Canada ended an early challenge to the Canadian Confederation without firing a single shot. In fact, the entire conflict only had a single casualty, and yet it had significant impacts on Canadian governance. It highlighted differences that still affect Canadian politics today. It holds a unique place in the annals of military history, and it helped to advance the career of one of the Victorian era's most capable officers. The 1870 Wolseley Expedition is history that deserves to be remembered. There are a few theories regarding the name Canada, but the most accepted is that it was a native St. Louis Iroquois word meaning village or settlement. Explorer Jacques Cartier, who claimed the country we now call Canada for France in the 16th century, called the place Le Pays de Canada, meaning the land of villages. While the term Canadian originally referred to the indigenous people, over time it was used to refer to French settlers in the New World in their colony called New France, and eventually to settlers in the British colony of Upper Canada. In 1670, British monarch Charles II granted a royal charter to the Governor and Company of Adventurers of England trading into Hudson's Bay, better known as the Hudson's Bay Company, for the sole trade and commerce in the Hudson's Bay watershed. This massive tract included a third of modern-day Canada, nearly 4 million square kilometers, 5 times the size of France. As the charter was given to the company under the governorship of Charles II's cousin, Prince Rupert of the Rhine, the vast new land was called Rupert's Land. The original economic value of Rupert's Land was in the fur trade, mostly beaver pelts, which were popular in Europe. Of course, the land that Charles II purported to give away was not uninhabited, but in fact included large populations of indigenous peoples. The Hudson's Bay Company traded with these people for furs, essentially transforming their economy from hunting and trapping for subsistence to a trade economy where furs were traded for European goods, including guns and alcohol. It was in the course of this trade that Europeans, both with the Hudson's Bay Company and in New France, formed unions with the indigenous populations, and that resulted in the unique people and culture called the Métis. These mixed-race descendants of colonial Europeans and native peoples filled a niche in the era of the fur trade, often acting as translators. Over time, a distinct Métis culture formed. In 1811, the Hudson's Bay Company granted the permission for Thomas Douglas, the 5th Earl of Selkirk, to create an agricultural colony in a part of Rupert's Land called the Red River region, under the agreement that the settlement would not involve itself in the fur trade. Selkirk's interest was in creating a place for displaced Scottish farmers. The area, some 600,000 square kilometers, or 5 times the size of Scotland, included fertile plains and buffalo grounds. Thus, the Red River colony became a place where indigenous peoples and Europeans mixed and had a large Métis population. In addition, the colony saw an influx of Scottish and English Protestants, as well as immigration from the United States. In fact, all of Canada was growing. Between 1815 and 1850, over 800,000 people immigrated from Europe in what was called the Great Migration of Canada. And as it grew, Canada was developing a national character and unifying. Lower Canada, formerly New France, had gone to the British in 1763 following the 7 Years' War. In 1840, they merged with the old British colony of Upper Canada to form a single colony of Canada. And then in 1867, the colony of Canada joined Nova Scotia and New Brunswick to unite into one Dominion of Canada. And the pressure was growing to bring Rupert's Land into that confederation. The Hudson's Bay Company realized that they didn't have the resources to manage a huge territory with a growing population rather than just a wilderness that was a place to acquire furs. Moreover, the United States of Wisconsin and Michigan clearly had designs on expanding into the Red River Territory, and one of the reasons that Canada was unifying was to resist U.S. expansion. So in 1869, the Hudson's Bay Company made an agreement with the Dominion of Canada to sell both Prince Rupert's Land and the Northwest Territories for £600,000, while still retaining most of their trading posts and some 5% of the land, which left the Hudson's Bay Company still the largest private landholder in the Dominion. John Macdonald, the first Prime Minister of Canada, appointed his Minister of Public Works, a politician named William McDougall, Lieutenant Governor of the vast new territories of the Dominion of Canada. But that is when trouble started. Louis Riel was a Métis born in Red River Settlement in 1844. He studied for both the seminary and law, but had completed neither education. Still, he excelled at languages, science, and philosophy. He was a natural leader for the cause of the Métis, who were concerned that their land rights and culture would not be respected in the Canadian Dominion. The Métis didn't trust MacDougall, who was not bilingual despite being made lieutenant governor of the part of the new country that had the largest number of citizens of French descent. When MacDougall brought a survey party to survey the Red River settlement, it offered a unique risk. Since the Métis lands had been surveyed under a French system, coming to survey under an English system implied that MacDougall was going to take away Métis land. When MacDougall and his survey team arrived to enter the Red River colony, Riel and a group of armed Métis prevented him entering, demanding that the new Canadian government first guarantee Métis rights. The Métis seized Fort Garry, the old Hudson Bay headquarters for the region, and created their own provisional government. At this point, events could hardly be called a rebellion. No shots had been fired. Both sides were ready to negotiate. But trouble was brewing within the Red River settlement itself. A small party had formed called the Canadian Party, made up mostly of Protestant agitators who supported annexation with Canada. Supporters of the Canadian Party tried to arrest Riel, but 47 members of the Canadian Party were instead caught and imprisoned. One agitator, a particularly cantankerous Irish Protestant named Thomas Scott, was so disruptive and troublesome to his guards that he was taken to trial and convicted of defying the authority of the provisional government. Despite knowing that it would inflame events, Riel had Scott executed in March of 1870, making him the first casualty of the Red River Rebellion. It was a miscalculation on Riel's part. Scott's execution allowed members of the Canadian Party to whip up anti-Métis sentiment in the Canadian capital. Prime Minister MacDonald still wanted to negotiate with the Métis, but public sentiment was shifting. And further, the Canadian Party asserted that Riel was really in cahoots with American expansionists who wanted to leverage the unrest in order to annex the Red River settlement to the United States. It was decided that a military expedition was needed in order to assert Canadian central authority over the Red River settlement. Garnet Joseph Wolseley was born in Dublin, Ireland, into a military family in 1833. His father, an army major, died when Garnet was young, and the family was not wealthy. Unable to afford to buy a commission, he was given a commission as an ensign in the 12th Foot at the age of 18 in recognition of his father's service. He'd seen a lot of combat, serving in the Second Burmese War, the Crimean War, the Indian Mutiny, and the Second Opium War, and had proven himself to be a competent officer. In 1861, he was sent to Canada and had taken a leave of absence to be an observer in the U.S. Civil War, where he showed distinct sympathies for the Confederate cause. He returned to Canada in 1865, where he was made colonel and assistant quartermaster general. In 1870, when it was decided that a military expedition was necessary to assert Canadian authority in the Red River colony, he was given command. It was his first independent command of his career. Understand, this was no mean feat. The most common way to get to the Red River colony was through the United States, but the U.S. refused to allow an armed force to traverse their territory. Through Canada, there was no road, and dense forest and wetland blocked the way. The alternative was a network of rivers and lakes that were nearly impassable and rarely crossed by non-Aboriginals. There was no place to get supply along the route. Moving 1,000 men and 4 cannon through hundreds of miles of wilderness was a stunning logistical feat. The expedition is considered by military historians to be among the most arduous in history. Although the government insisted the expedition was intended to be peaceful, Riel rightly feared arrest. When Wolseley and his troops finally arrived, they found Fort Garry empty. Riel had fled to the United States, and so the Red River Rebellion had ended without a shot. The province of Manitoba, which includes the former Red River colony, was created in the 1870 Manitoba Act. Not only did it guarantee Métis land rights, it also guaranteed parliamentary representation, the right to denominational schools, and the official use of both the French and English language. While the act was imperfect and has led to some controversy, in practice it addressed all of Riel's main points, and to that extent the Red River Rebellion can be said to have been a success. To many, Louis Riel is seen as the father of the province of Manitoba, which is today Canada's 5th most populous province, and the former Fort Garry is now the city of Winnipeg, with a metropolitan population of over 800,000. But tensions and land issues continued as the government in Ottawa struggled with competing interests across the vast territory. In 1885, Riel became involved in the more violent Northwest Rebellion. Riel was captured, tried for treason, and hung. To this day, many insist that the death sentence was really punishment for the execution of Thomas Scott in 1870. You can still see the scars of the rebellion today, where both Louis Riel and Thomas Scott are perceived either as innocent victims who are wrongfully executed or as dirty traitors who deserve to die, depending upon your point of view. The Wolseley Expedition led to an influx of white Europeans into the Red River area, and that further inflamed ethnic tensions. And despite the promises of the Manitoba Act, many of the Métis actually relocated to the Saskatchewan area. And the land guarantees ended up being largely stolen by land speculators who readily exploited the Métis. The Wolseley Expedition did, though, put an end to any designs that the United States might have had of expanding into the Red River Territory, but that was never very likely, as even the Red River rebels opposed the Americans. What the 1870 Wolseley Expedition also did was greatly burnish the reputation of Garnet Wolseley, who would become one of the most celebrated and successful officers of the British Victorian Army. He was knighted for managing the extraordinary logistical challenge, and his reputation for organization was so impressive that the phrase, "all Sir Garnet," came to mean that everything was in order. That reputation would lead to his being promoted to Major General and appointed to command the 1874 Ashanti Expedition on the Gold Coast of Africa, and drove a meteoric rise that would make him a household name in Britain, eventually being promoted to Field Marshal and made Commander-in-Chief of the Forces, the highest rank in the British Army. Through much of the 19th century, the British press referred to Sir Garnet Wolseley as our only general, and his first independent command, which never fired a single shot, deserves to be remembered. I'm the History Guy, and I hope you enjoyed this edition of my series of short snippets of forgotten history about 10 minutes long. And if you did enjoy, please go ahead and click that thumbs up button, which is there on your left. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to write those in the comment section. I will be happy to personally respond. And if you'd like more snippets of forgotten history, all you need to do is subscribe.